The unexpected encounter, the heavy rain hammered against the windshield of the truck, its sound drowning out the soft hum of the engine. Jake, a trucker with years of experience behind the wheel, was used to the lonely roads, the long hours, and the quiet that came with them. He had seen everything on his travels: mountain roads, city streets, and barren highways. But tonight was different. The storm made everything feel uncertain. He couldn't see far ahead, and the roads were slick with water, making every mile feel longer than the last. Jake looked out the window, squinting to make out the dark, wet landscape. That's when he saw her, a figure standing alone at the side of the road. She was hard to see at first, barely visible through the rain, but there she was. Her clothes clung to her body, soaked from the storm, but she didn't seem to mind. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dark, or maybe it was just his tired mind playing tricks on him. He slowed the truck, his instincts kicking in. Something about her made him stop. Maybe it was the look in her eyes, or maybe it was the strange feeling in his gut that told him this was no ordinary encounter. The truck came to a stop, the engines rumbling, breaking the silence of the night. Jake rolled down the window and leaned out, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. "Need a lift?" he called out, his voice rough from the hours of driving. The woman didn't answer right away. She simply stared at him with those glowing eyes, as if she was deciding whether to trust him. Jake's heart skipped a beat. It was the middle of nowhere, and the last thing he needed was trouble. But something about her made him want to help. Maybe it was the storm, or maybe it was the way she looked, standing there in the pouring rain. But Jake couldn't leave her behind. She finally nodded and took a step forward. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice calm but distant. Her accent was strange, not something Jake could place, but he didn't ask questions. He opened the door for her, and she climbed into the passenger seat without another word. The smell of rain followed her inside the truck, and for a moment the air felt cooler, as if something had shifted. As the door shut behind her, Jake glanced over. She was young, maybe in her 20s, with wet hair that clung to her shoulders, and a pale face that seemed almost too perfect to be real. Her eyes, bright and intense, seemed to glow faintly in the dark. She didn't speak, but her presence felt like an echo in the quiet truck. Jake wasn't sure why, but he couldn't stop looking at her. There was something captivating about her, something that didn't belong in the world he knew. He cleared his throat, trying to break the silence. "Where are you headed?" he asked, his voice steady, though he couldn't shake the odd feeling in his chest. She didn't answer right away, as if she was thinking carefully about her words. "Anywhere," she said simply. Her voice was soft, almost like a whisper. "I'm just ... passing through." Jake didn't press her. He was used to quiet passengers, especially on long hauls like this. Most people didn't want to talk, just wanted to get where they were going. He focused back on the road, his hands gripping the wheel as the rain continued to fall heavily around them. The truck's headlights cut through the darkness, and the occasional flash of lightning lit up the sky, casting strange shadows on the road. As they drove on, Jake couldn't help but glance over at her again. She hadn't moved much, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Her skin was flawless too, perfect, and her eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. She was beautiful, but there was something strange about her. Something about her seemed ... otherworldly. Jake shook his head. Maybe it was the isolation, or maybe he was just tired from the long drive, but he felt a pull toward her. It was as if he was drawn to her presence, like something inside of him knew this wasn't just another hitchhiker. The silence between them was almost suffocating. But Jake didn't mind. The storm outside seemed to grow stronger, the wind howling. As the truck rumbled down the slick road, he glanced in the rearview mirror, his eyes scanning the road behind them, but all he could see was the blackness of the storm. No other cars, no signs of life, just them, and yet, despite the silence, he felt an uneasy sense of connection. It was like the road had brought them together for some reason, but Jake wasn't sure if it was a good reason. There was something he couldn't quite understand about her, something that made his heart race a little faster than it should. He didn't know her name, didn't know where she was from, and didn't know what she was really doing out here in the middle of nowhere. But in that moment, none of that seemed to matter. All Jake knew was that, for reasons he couldn't explain, this strange woman sitting beside him was something he couldn't ignore. And for the first time in a long time, he had the feeling that tonight his life was about to change forever. A mysterious stranger. The truck's engine hummed steadily as the road stretched out in front of them. The rain showed no sign of letting up, and the night seemed to hold an eerie stillness. Jake stole another glance at the woman sitting next. To him, she was still silent, her eyes distant, as if lost in her thoughts. The glow from the dashboard illuminated her face in a soft light, making her look almost ethereal. Her skin, pale and smooth, seemed to shimmer faintly in the darkness. The silence between them was becoming uncomfortable. Jake wasn't one for long conversations, but there was something about her that made him curious. He had picked up many hitchhikers in his time, but none of them had made him feel this way. The connection between them, though unspoken, was undeniable. Finally, Jake broke the silence. "So, where are you from?" he asked, his voice cautious but polite. He tried to sound casual, but his curiosity was growing by the minute. The woman didn't immediately respond. She just stared out the window, her face reflecting the flickering light from the truck's headlights. Jake wondered if she had even heard him. But then, after a long pause, she turned to him, her glowing eyes meeting his. There was something strange about the way she looked at him, like she was seeing right through him, into the very depths of his soul. "I'm from far away," she said softly, her voice almost melodic. There was no accent, no familiar tone to her words. It was as if she spoke a language of her own, one that Jake couldn't quite understand. Jake frowned, trying to make sense of her words. "Far away, you mean ... from another town?" he asked, his voice thick with skepticism. He wasn't sure what he was expecting, but her answer felt like an enigma, like she wasn't telling him the whole truth. She gave him a small smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Something like that," she replied. There was a weight in her voice, something unspoken that made Jake feel uneasy. The trucker shifted in his seat, feeling an odd tension in the air. He couldn't put his finger on it, but something about her wasn't adding up. He had seen his share of strange situations on the road, but this one felt different. Her presence was unsettling, like there was more to her story than she was willing to share. The way she looked at him, the way she spoke, everything felt like a puzzle, and Jake wasn't sure if he wanted to solve it. He tried to shake off the feeling. He wasn't one to jump to conclusions. People had their reasons for being secretive, especially when they were in a vulnerable situation. But the more he thought about it, the more something didn't sit right with him. The way she avoided his questions, the way she seemed so calm. Even in the storm, she wasn't acting like anyone he'd ever met. As the truck rumbled down the highway, Jake's eyes kept darting back to her. She was so still, almost too still. It was like she didn't even notice the storm raging outside or the roads slick with rain. Her expression was calm, but there was an intensity in her eyes that made him nervous. He had dealt with a lot of people in his life, but he had never encountered someone like her. Minutes passed in silence. The rain fell harder now, pounding against the windshield in a rhythmic beat. The trucker focused on the road ahead, his grip tight on the steering wheel. He tried to push his doubts aside, telling himself she was just another stranger on the road, nothing more. But every time he glanced at her, his heart skipped a beat. There was something about her that he couldn't explain, something that felt ... otherworldly ... Suddenly, as if sensing his gaze, she turned to him again, her eyes glowing faintly in the dark, locked with his. She didn't say anything at first. She just stared, as if measuring him, studying him. "You're not afraid of me, are you?" she asked, her voice soft but filled with a strange undertone. It was a question that caught him off guard. Of course, he was uneasy, but he wasn't going to admit that to her. He didn't want to look weak, especially not to someone he barely knew. Jake forced a chuckle, trying to brush off the tension. "Afraid? Nah, just trying to figure you out, that's all," he replied. He kept his eyes on the road, but his mind was racing. He hadn't meant for the question to sound so ... unsure, but it had. She smiled slightly, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "You don't need to figure me out," she said, her voice laced with something mysterious. "I'm not here to hurt you." Jake's heart skipped a beat. There was something about her words that made him feel vulnerable, exposed. It was like she knew exactly what he was thinking, like she could read his mind. He shook his head, trying to dismiss the strange thoughts that were creeping into his mind. There was no reason to be afraid, right? She was just a hitchhiker, nothing more. The trucker glanced at her again, trying to make sense of her. But all he could see was the same calm, unreadable expression on her face. She was like a puzzle, one he wasn't sure he wanted to solve. And yet, despite his unease, something inside of him kept telling him to stay. Something deep within urged him to keep driving, to keep listening. He didn't know why, but he couldn't ignore it. There was more to her, he was sure of it. And as much as he tried to push the thought away, a nagging voice in his head told him that tonight, everything was about to change. The silence between them, the storm outside continued to rage, the rain now coming down in sheets. The truck's headlights cut through the darkness, but everything beyond the road seemed swallowed by the night. The air inside the truck felt thick, heavy with unspoken words. Jake focused on the road, his hands gripping the wheel a little too tightly, his mind racing. The woman, however, seemed unaffected by the storm, the noise, or the tension. She sat still, her hands resting delicately on her lap, eyes staring out the window as if lost in her thoughts. Her silence wasn't uncomfortable, at least. Not at first, but after a while. Jake couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to her than met the eye. Her stillness, her calm in the face of the storm. It wasn't normal. People, normal people, were anxious when they were stuck in a truck on a rain-soaked highway, especially in the middle of nowhere. But not her. She was different. There was a quiet power about her, something he couldn't explain. Jake stole another glance at her. She didn't seem to notice. Her face, though beautiful, seemed almost too perfect, too serene. Her skin, pale as porcelain, seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. The glowing eyes that had first caught his attention were now just distant, almost unblinking, as if she was somewhere else entirely. Her body language was come to command. Her complete lack of concern about the storm unsettled him. He had no idea why, but his curiosity was growing stronger. He couldn't get rid of the nagging feeling that there was something more to her than she was letting on. She was hiding something. Maybe it was the way she moved so gracefully, as if she wasn't just a passenger in his truck, but something else, something that didn't quite fit. Maybe it was the way her eyes seemed to flicker with an inner light when she thought he wasn't looking. "Why are you so quiet?" Jake finally asked, breaking the silence. His voice sounded louder than he intended, but it wasn't meant to be confrontational. He wasn't sure why he was asking, only that he couldn't stand the silence anymore. The woman slowly turned her head to face him. Her eyes met his, glowing faintly in the dark, and for a moment, Jake felt like she was seeing right through him. There was a strange warmth in her gaze, but also something else, something ancient, something wise. "I don't have much to say," she replied softly, her voice still calm, almost a calm. "Sometimes words aren't necessary." Jake didn't know how to respond. He hadn't expected her answer, and it only made him more curious. Who was she really? She was unlike anyone he had ever met. Most people, when they found themselves alone with a stranger, would talk to fill the silence, but not her. She seemed perfectly comfortable in her own quiet company. "So, where are you really from?" Jake asked again, his tone gentler. "This time, you said you're just passing through, but that doesn't really explain anything." The woman paused, as if considering her response. Jake could see her mind working, deciding how much to reveal. She didn't seem scared or threatened by the question. Instead, she seemed thoughtful, as if she were choosing her words carefully. "I'm from far away," she said again, but this time there was something more behind the words. "A place that isn't on any map you've ever seen." Jake narrowed his eyes. "What do you mean? Are you saying you're not from around here?" "Not from Earth." She didn't answer right away, and the trucker felt his heart rate quicken. There was a quiet pause, but in the heavy silence, her gaze never left him. It was like she was weighing the decision to speak. When she finally spoke again, her voice was even quieter, but the weight of her words hung in the air. "I'm not from Earth," she said, her eyes never leaving his. "I come from a place far beyond your understanding." Jake's mind raced. He had heard strange stories in his time on the road, stories of UFOs, alien sightings, and things that went bump in the night. But this was different. This wasn't some crazy trucker's tale or a passing legend. This was real. He blinked, trying to process what she was saying. "Wait. Are you saying you single quote, an alien?" She didn't flinch at the word. She just nodded slowly. "Yes." Jake felt his mouth go dry. He had no idea what to say. His mind couldn't catch up with his mouth. Was this some kind of joke? No, it didn't feel like one. She wasn't acting, like someone who was making up a story to get attention. There was an undeniable calmness in her, like she was telling the truth. The trucker swallowed, his hands tightening on the wheel. He looked out the windshield at the rain, trying to steady his breath, trying to make sense of everything. But nothing made sense anymore. He was talking to an alien, an actual alien. "Why are you here?" Jake asked, the question tumbling out before he could think. He wanted answers, needed them. "I'm here to understand," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm here to learn, to experience what your people have. Kindness, compassion, the things that make you, human." Jake didn't know what to say to that. It felt like a dream, or maybe a nightmare. His mind was reeling with 100 different questions, but he couldn't focus on any of them. Instead, he found himself looking at her with a strange mix of awe and disbelief. There was no way to explain it, but deep down, Jake knew she wasn't just some hitchhiker. She wasn't just a stranger on the side of the road. She was something much more, and whatever this strange encounter was far from over. The heartfelt gifter truck rolled steadily along the wet highway, but Jake's mind felt like it was spinning out of control. The rain had started to subside, and the night sky was clear again, though it seemed far too quiet, as if the storm had just been a prelude to something much bigger. He glanced at the woman sitting beside him, still calm and composed, her glowing eyes fixed out the window. Despite her calm demeanor, Jake could feel the weight of her presence more than ever. There was something about her, something beyond her otherworldly appearance and her strange, distant demeanor. He couldn't explain it, but he felt connected to her in a way that was both comforting and unsettling. And now, with the revelation that she wasn't from Earth, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just taken a turn into the unknown. As they drove on, the silence between them grew, but this time it felt different. It wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was more like a stillness, as if the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Then, without warning, the woman turned to face him. Her gaze met his, and for a moment it felt like time had stopped. There was a softness in her eyes, a kind of sadness that Jake hadn't noticed before. It was as if she was carrying a heavy burden, one that she had never shared with anyone. "I have something for you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. It was the first time she had spoken with any real emotion, and it caught Jake off guard. He raised an eyebrow, his curiosity piqued. "Something for me?" She nodded, her expression serious. "Yes, a gift from my people. It's something that ... can never be given lightly." She reached into her coat, and for a moment, Jake thought she was going to pull out some kind of strange alien artifact. But when she pulled her hand back, she was holding something small, something that glimmered faintly in the dim light of the truck. It was a small, delicate object, shaped like a crystal, but unlike any crystal Jake had ever seen. It shimmered with an iridescent glow, shifting through colors Jake couldn't quite name. He couldn't take his eyes off it, feeling an almost magnetic pull toward the object in her hand. "What is it?" Jake asked, his voice almost a whisper, as though he were afraid to break the moment. The woman's eyes softened, and she gently extended her hand, offering the crystal to him. "It's called a Lamara. It's a symbol of trust and gratitude from my people. We give it to those who show kindness, who show something that we, as a race, have lost, the ability to trust." Jake stared at the crystal, unsure of what to say. The object was beautiful, its colors shifting in ways that seemed almost alive. It felt warm in his hands, as if it held a power far beyond anything he could understand. She didn't speak, but Jake could see in her eyes that this was important, that this was something that carried weight. This wasn't just some trinket. It was a gift, a gesture of thanks, but also a symbol of something deeper, something that Jake had yet to comprehend. "But why give it to me?" Jake asked, his voice thick with emotion. He wasn't sure why, but holding the crystal felt like holding something precious, something that could change everything. "I'm just a trucker. I didn't do anything special." The woman's gaze softened even more, and for the first time, she smiled, a small, gentle smile that seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 unspoken words. "Kindness is special," she said simply. It's rare, even among your people. But you showed it to me. And in doing so, you've earned this. The Shalmara will carry a piece of my world with you, a reminder that no act of kindness goes unnoticed, no matter how small. Jake's heart skipped a beat. The weight of her words settled into him, and for a moment he couldn't speak. The crystal in his hands seemed to pulse with energy, and he could feel the warmth radiating from it as though it were alive, connected to something much larger than himself. He looked down at the Shalmara, his fingers tracing its smooth surface. It was beautiful, yes, but it was more than that. It was a reminder of the strange woman sitting next to him, the woman who had just revealed that she was not from this world, and who was now offering him a gift that could only be given to someone truly deserving. I don't know what to say, Jake admitted, his voice low. I don't even know what this means, but I won't forget it. The woman nodded, her smile fading but still lingering in her eyes. That's all I ask, she said softly. Just remember, in the vastness of the universe, kindness is the one thing that connects us all. It's a language everyone can speak. Jake felt a lump in his throat. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected any of it. But somehow, he felt like he understood just a little bit more what she was trying to say. In her eyes, he saw something he hadn't seen in a long time. Hope. A hope that people, no matter where they came from, could still show kindness to one another. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to make a difference. As the truck continued down the rain-soaked highway, Jake held the Shalmara close, feeling its warmth in his hands. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like maybe, just maybe, he was part of something much larger than himself. And as he glanced at the woman sitting beside him, he realized that the journey ahead wasn't just about getting from one place to another. It was about understanding, about connection, and about the power of a single, small act of kindness. A connection beyond words. The road stretched ahead, slick with the remnants of the storm, but Jake barely noticed. His eyes were fixed on the small, glowing crystal in his hands, the Shalmara. It seemed to pulse with a quiet energy, as if it were alive, or perhaps connected to something much larger than he could understand. He had always prided himself on being a no-nonsense kind of guy, someone who believed only in what he could see and touch. But tonight, as the crystal warmed his palms, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing on the edge of something unimaginable. The woman beside him sat still, her hands resting calmly on her lap. Her gaze, distant and thoughtful, was locked on the road ahead, but Jake noticed the soft glow in her eyes. They seemed to be reflecting something more than just the road. It was like she was seeing beyond the present moment, seeing something he couldn't even begin to comprehend. For the first time, Jake felt something shift within him. He had always been alone on the road, his truck a refuge from the world. It had been his life for years, his only companion. But now, with this mysterious woman at his side, things were different. His world had expanded in ways he wasn't prepared for, and the strangest part was, he didn't feel afraid. He should have been, but he wasn't. Instead, he felt ... connected. Connected to her, to the crystal, to something larger than himself. Tell me more, Jake said, his voice soft, as if the very act of speaking could break the fragile connection he felt. About your people, about where you come from. I know you've told me you're not from Earth, but I need to understand more. The woman's eyes flickered, and she turned her gaze to him, meeting his eyes with an intensity that made his heart race. There's not much to tell, she replied, her voice calm but layered with something he couldn't quite place. We come from a place far beyond your stars, a place that has seen a great deal of pain and loss. My people, ... We were once many, but now we are few. I am one of the last of my kind. Jake's breath caught in his throat. He wasn't sure why, but hearing her speak of her people with such sadness made him feel a strange, deep sorrow, as if he, too, were mourning a loss he didn't understand. What happened? Jake asked, his voice quiet now. What happened to your people? Where did they go? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stared out the window, her expression distant, as if she were looking into another world, another time. We lost our way, she said softly, her words heavy with regret. We became too focused on power, on domination. We forgot the importance of kindness, of connection, and when we realized what we had done, it was too late. Our world, it was destroyed. Jake was silent for a long time, letting her words sink in. The weight of them hung between them, filling the air with an indescribable sadness. For a moment, all he could hear was the sound of the rain hitting the windshield and the hum of the truck's engine. He felt small in the face of her story, but he also felt something stirring within him, something he hadn't felt in years. A desire to help, a desire to change. I'm sorry, Jake said finally, his voice soft with empathy. I can't imagine what that must have been like. She nodded, her eyes still distant. It was a long time ago, but the loss, it stays with us. We carry it in our hearts. It shapes everything we do. She looked back at him, her eyes more intense now, as if something inside her was awakening. That's why I came here to your world. To understand what you have that we lost, the thing that can save us, kindness. Jake didn't know what to say. He was just a trucker. He didn't have the answers she was looking for. He wasn't someone who could change the fate of a people. But as he looked at her, he realized that maybe it wasn't about having the answers. Maybe it was about being present, about showing up when it mattered. Maybe that was all anyone could do. I don't know if I can help you, Jake said quietly, his fingers tightening around the crystal. I don't know what I can offer, but I know one thing. Kindness is more than just a feeling. It's something we do. It's in the way we treat each other, the way we connect. If that's what you're looking for, I think you've already found it. The woman's gaze softened, and for a moment, the world seemed to stop. The weight of everything, the distance between them, the secrets of her past, it all melted away in that single moment of understanding. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The connection was enough. Thank you, she whispered, her voice barely audible, but full of sincerity. You've given me something I didn't expect. A glimpse of hope. Jake's heart skipped a beat. He had no idea what he had just done, but in that moment, he felt something stir deep inside of him. Maybe he had been wrong all along. Maybe there was more to life than just the road, more to the world than just the truck and the miles ahead. Maybe it wasn't about the destination, it was about the people we meet along the way. The connections we make. As they continued down the road, Jake couldn't help but feel that the journey ahead was no longer just about getting from point A to point B. It was about something much larger, something much deeper. The woman beside him had shown him a truth he hadn't understood before. That kindness, connection, and love weren't just words, they were the things that could change the world. And maybe, just maybe, they could change the fate of her people, too. The road ahead seemed less lonely now, less uncertain. As the truck moved on, Jake felt the weight of the crystal in his hands, and for the first time, he didn't feel alone. He felt like he was part of something much larger than himself. A decision of the heart. The highway stretched out before them, endless and dark. The rain had stopped, but the heavy clouds hung low in the sky, casting a muted light across the landscape. Jake couldn't help but feel like he was driving into the unknown, but for the first time, it didn't feel so scary. It felt like the road ahead was filled with possibility that had come from a strange and unlikely encounter with an alien. The crystal, still warm in his hand, had become a symbol, something more than just an artifact from another world. It was a reminder of the woman beside him, a reminder of the connection they shared, even though they had only known each other for a short time. But in that time, Jake had come to realize that she wasn't just some hitchhiker, she was something more. She had changed his perspective on everything, the world, kindness, even life itself. He glanced at her again. She was looking out the window, her face lit by the soft glow of the dashboard. Her expression was unreadable, but Jake could sense the heaviness in her. There was something else she hadn't told him, something that lingered in the silence between them, and though he wasn't sure what it was, he could feel it like a weight that had been pressing on her for a long time. He had helped her, sure, but now, as they neared their destination, Jake realized that he wasn't sure what would happen next. He had given her the kindness she had sought, the trust she needed, but in return, she had given him so much more, a gift of understanding, a gift of hope. And now, with the end of their journey nearing, Jake was faced with a decision, one that could change everything. "Are you sure you want to go?" Jake asked quietly, his voice hesitant, unsure if he even wanted to hear the answer. The question was simple, but it held so much more weight. The woman turned her head slowly to look at him, her glowing eyes soft but steady. "I've come as far as I can," she said, her voice gentle, but there was a sadness to it that tugged at Jake's heart. "This is where my journey ends." Jake's chest tightened. He didn't know what to say. The thought of her leaving, of going back to wherever she had come from, felt like a blow to his chest. He had grown to care for her in such a short time, maybe more than he cared to admit. And the idea of losing her, of her disappearing from his life like a dream fading at dawn, was something he wasn't sure he could handle. "Is there no way?" Jake started, but the words caught in his throat. He couldn't finish the sentence. He couldn't bring himself to ask if there was a way for her to stay. Could he really ask her to stay in his world, a world that wasn't hers, a world full of pain and hardship? She seemed to understand what he was trying to say, even though he hadn't spoken the words. "I'm not from your world, Jake," she said softly, as if reading his mind. "And there are things in my past, things I cannot change, things I cannot bring here. I can never truly belong here. My place is elsewhere." Jake's heart sank. He had known, deep down, that this moment was coming, that their time together was temporary. But he had allowed himself to believe, for just a moment, that maybe they could share something more, maybe they could build something together. The thought of letting go now seemed impossible. "You don't belong here," Jake repeated, almost to himself. "But you've shown me what it means to truly live. You've shown me what it means to be kind, to trust, to see the world through someone else's eyes. YOUVE. You've changed me. And I can't help but think that maybe, just maybe, we were meant to meet." The woman's gaze softened, and a small, bittersweet smile tugged at her lips. "You don't need me to change, Jake," she said quietly. "You already have the power to change the world. I've seen it in you. Your kindness, Your heart, that's what makes you who you are. That's what makes you human. Jake didn't know what to say. He wasn't sure what to feel. He had been looking for answers his whole life, and now, in the presence of someone who had lived 1,000 lifetimes, he felt more confused than ever. But in his heart, there was one truth that stood out above the rest. He couldn't let her go, not without doing something. What if I came with you? Jake asked, his voice shaking slightly. What if I could find a way to go with you? I could leave all of this behind the truck, the long roads, and we could go somewhere you belong. She shook her head, her eyes soft but firm. Jake, you have your life here. You have your purpose, and I have mine. This is how it was meant to be. Jake's chest tightened as he stared at her. It hurt more than he could put into words, the idea of never seeing her again, of never knowing what could have been. But deep down, he knew she was right. She had her world, and he had his. And maybe, just maybe, that was how it was always meant to be. I won't forget you, Jake said softly, his voice thick with emotion. I won't forget what you taught me, and I won't forget the kindness you showed me. She smiled, a small, knowing smile that seemed to carry all the wisdom of the universe. I'll never forget you either, Jake. You've given me a piece of your world, and for that, I will always be grateful. As the truck pulled into the small, deserted rest stop ahead, Jake's heart was heavy, but there was peace in it too. They had come together for a brief moment in time, and now their paths would diverge. But the memory of the woman beside him, the woman who had changed his life forever, would stay with him for as long as he lived. The truck came to a stop, the engine's hum quieting. Jake looked at her one last time, his heart aching but full. Goodbye, she said softly, and with that, she opened the door and stepped out into the night. Disappearing into the unknown, Jake sat there for a long moment, his hand still holding the crystal, the weight of it comforting in his palm. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, he felt ready for whatever came next. Because sometimes, the road ahead wasn't just about where you were going, it was about the connections you made along the way. The heartwarming goodbye, the sound of the truck's engine idling slowly faded as the woman walked away, disappearing into the quiet darkness of the night. Jake sat in silence, his hands still gripping the steering wheel, his gaze fixed on the spot where she had just been. A sense of emptiness filled the truck, and for a moment, he wondered if everything that had happened, everything they had shared, had been nothing more than a dream. But the Shalmara crystal in his hand was real. Its soft glow pulsed with warmth, and the faint hum of energy that seemed to surround it reminded him that she had been real, that this connection they had formed, no matter how brief, had been real, and that realization, painful as it was, filled him with something else, something more powerful than just sadness. It was peace. He sighed deeply, his breath coming out in a long, slow exhale. He wasn't sure how long he sat there, in the quiet of the truck, lost in his thoughts. The world outside had returned to its peaceful stillness. The storm that had raged just hours before now, nothing more than a memory. The stars were visible, once again, twinkling in the sky above, their light calm and reassuring. Jake finally opened the door of the truck and stepped outside, the cold air hitting him with a refreshing sharpness. He looked around, his eyes scanning the empty rest stop. There were no other vehicles, no people, just him and the night. But somehow, he didn't feel alone. Not anymore. He held the Shalmara in his hand, feeling its warmth pulse softly through. His fingers, In that moment, he realized that it wasn't just the woman who had changed him, it was the journey itself. The kindness, the connection, the way he had opened up to someone he couldn't even understand. That was what mattered. That was the lesson she had come to teach him. Kindness connects us all, he whispered to himself, echoing her words. And he knew that no matter where she had gone, or where he was headed next, that lesson would stay with him forever. Jake glanced one last time at the road stretching out before him, the long, lonely highway that had been his constant companion. But now, he didn't see it the same way. The road was no longer just a path to somewhere, it was a journey. A journey that was made meaningful by the people we meet, the kindness we share, and the connections we form along the way. With a deep breath, Jake turned and walked back to the truck. He knew that his life would never be the same, that the road ahead would be different now. But there was no fear in him, no uncertainty. For the first time, he felt ready for whatever came next. He wasn't just a trucker anymore. He was someone who understood that kindness, even in the smallest form, had the power to change the world. He climbed back into the truck, the engine roaring to life once again. As he drove off into the night, the headlights cutting through the darkness, Jake felt a sense of peace settle over him. The road ahead might still be long, but it was no longer just a place to escape. It was a place where he could make a difference, where every encounter, every moment, mattered. And with the Shalmara in his hand, he knew he would never forget the woman who had shown him the true meaning of kindness, the woman who had come into his life just for a moment and changed it forever as he drove. Jake looked up at the stars, feeling a strange warmth in his chest. Somewhere far beyond the stars, the woman was watching him, her presence lingering in the air. And in that quiet moment, Jake knew that the kindness he had shared with her wasn't just a gift for her, was a gift for him, too. A gift that would carry him forward, wherever the road took him. He smiled, the road stretching ahead of him once again, but this time, it didn't feel so lonely. It felt full of possibility, full of hope, and with that, Jake drove on, the world around him waiting to be discovered.